Welcome back to Morgborg Tech. It's time that I give you the update on my 44-piece eBay phone lot that you all have been waiting so patiently for. If you don't know, I bought this phone lot initially back in June of last year. I filmed the unboxing video shortly after, but I didn't end up releasing it until November. And I've been sitting on this lot ever since, slowly testing all the phones. And I will say, I cleaned all of them shortly after the unboxing. These were some of the toughest phones, not some of these specifically, but a few of them are some of the toughest phones to clean that I've ever gotten. So they're in much better shape than when I first got them. So these are the working phones, 29 of them. 8 of them are untested, and 7 are broken. So yeah, let's take a look at the working phones here. I'll go ahead and start up and shut down all of them and tell you any issues they might have. So here's a Nokia 6103 on T-Mobile. As you can tell, this one is in pretty rough shape, but it works totally fine. Lots of scratches on the front here. This one was kind of sticky when I first got it, but now it's not sticky at all. Next up here is the LG 505C on TracFone. This one works totally fine, but the screen is slightly discolored. It's a little warmer than it should be. Has sort of a yellowish tint. You might be able to tell. Yeah, here you can tell pretty good the yellowing of the screen. I'm not sure why it happens. It's kind of weird. None of my other phones do this, but everything works totally fine. It's in pretty decent physical condition otherwise. Next up is the Pantech PN300 for Verizon. This one works totally fine, and it's in pretty good shape. That was a little weird. No startup sound there. Let's see if we can get that startup sound. Guess not. Do know that that phone does have a startup sound though. Next up here is AT&T Singular Flip 2 on AT&T. This one works totally fine. This phone's one of the cousins to the Alcatel Go Flip, if you didn't know. I haven't put my Morgborg wallpaper on this one yet. Next up here is an LG VX8100 on Verizon. This one works totally fine, but it's kind of beat up, like a lot of these phones. So you can see I have airplane mode enabled. No sense in having service turned on when 3G has been shut down. Next up here is a Samsung Galaxy Prevail on Boost Mobile. Screen's got some pretty deep scratches and the back cover's missing, but otherwise this one works totally fine. I might sell this one someday. I'll go ahead and put this one to the side while it shuts off. And let's move on to this phone here. This is a Nokia 3120 on Singular. It's in decent shape, but the battery is starting to swell up, so I don't know how much longer I'll hang on to it. Thankfully, this one just takes a standard Nokia battery that I have several of. Next up here is a Dell Venue Pro on AT&T. This is a pretty early Windows phone. Next up, here's the Alcatel MyFlip on TrackPhone. So you can tell this phone and the Singular Flip 2 are related. They look almost the same other than carrier branding. This one doesn't have my Morgborg wallpaper either. Moving on is the Samsung Galaxy Avant on T-Mobile. This one works totally fine, but this back cover is pretty sticky. I might find a way to clean this up. All right, moving on. This is the Samsung Exhibit 2 on T-Mobile. This one works totally fine. Moving on, here's the HTC HD2 on T-Mobile. This one works fine, but it's kind of beat up. Back cover's missing, and the glass is heavily cracked, which causes these buttons here to kind of slide around. They don't really work right unless they're pushed all the way to the left. Funny enough, the power button's actually down here, like a basic phone, even though this is a smartphone. That sounded weird. This one takes a minute to turn on, so I'll go ahead and set it to the side. Next up here is the LG Expression on AT&T. Has this pretty nice red color. It's in pretty decent shape. Works fine other than I have to press this power button kind of hard to turn the phone on. Moving back to the HTC here. Let's go ahead and turn this one off now. Moving on here, this is the ZTE Salute on Verizon. This one works fine, and it would actually be an untested phone because I don't have a battery for it. If it weren't for the fact that this phone actually works totally fine, just straight off the charger without a battery. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that for you now. This phone's in pretty good shape. All right, so I'll go ahead and plug this phone in for you now. And it'll power right up. Yeah, I don't have an OEM charger, so it's making that sound. And I have airplane mode enabled. All right, so let's move back on over. Moving on here, this is the Alcatel Venture on Q-Link. So you can see this phone is Virgin Mobile branded, but when I turn it on, you'll notice that it doesn't have a Virgin Mobile startup or shut down. This one works totally fine, if I didn't say that already. Moving on, this is an iPod Touch 4th generation, an 8GB model if I remember right. It's in decent shape. I think I have a couple of iPods in better shape than this one, but this one's still in pretty alright shape, seeing as how these get scratched easily over the years. Moving on, here's a Nokia 1616 on T-Mobile. It's in a little rough shape, but it works fine. Let's go back to the iPod here. And I actually do have my Morgborg wallpaper on here. Moving on, here's a Kyocera S2100 on Virgin Mobile. This one is in pretty good shape and it works totally fine. Moving on, here's the Samsung Fascinate on Verizon. Moving on is the LG Chocolate 3 on Verizon. This one works totally fine. It's a little scratched up, and the charging port is a little loose on it. So now I've got the original chocolate in 2 colors, and I have the chocolate 3. I still need the chocolate touch and another chocolate 2 because mine broke. Moving on, here's a Pantech Link 2 on AT&T. This one works totally fine and it's in really good shape here actually. It's starting to get dark outside, so my camera's having a bit of a hard time focusing. This one doesn't have a startup or shutdown sound. Moving on, here's the LG Optimus V on Virgin Mobile. This one works fine, but the digitizer I think might be starting to fail, so I don't know how much longer this phone will be in working condition for. Just earlier I was having a hard time with the digitizer on this phone, which you'll see in a bit. Next up here is a Moto E. I think this phone might be unlocked, or it might be on an unbranded carrier. This one works fine, but the glass is pretty badly cracked. I'll show you how tough the digitizer is. You see how hard I'm tapping. Seems like certain parts of the touch screen probably don't work anymore. Now, unlike the last phone, this phone's digitizer works perfectly fine, as with the rest of my smartphones in this lot, in this section here. Moving on is an LG G3 on T-Mobile. This one works fine, but it's cracked, and this one was missing the battery and back cover. I took both from my other LG G3, which I've had in my collection for a long time. This one is in white. My other one is in gray. Moving on is the LG Neon on AT&T. This one is in pretty good shape. Let's go back to the G3 here. This one doesn't have my Morgborg wallpaper yet, either. Moving on, here's an Alcatel OT510A on AT&T. And I'm really glad that this one works because, as you might know, I got one of these in a previous phone lot that ended up having a broken screen. So this one works perfectly fine. Down to the last few here. Here's a BlackBerry Tour 9630 on Verizon. I had one of these back in the day in my collection, but I since removed it because it had corrupted software. This one works fine. It's in alright shape, except there's some dead pixels on the screen, which you'll see. You can see them right here. Otherwise, this phone works totally fine. It's actually the only working BlackBerry phone in this lot, unfortunately. Just as I'm starting to warm up to BlackBerry phones, I have a hard time getting my hands on them. Moving on here, this is a Motorola V551 on AT&T Wireless. I took this battery from my Motorola V60, which also happens to be on AT&T Wireless, which is why I don't have the back cover on, because this battery's too big, as you can tell. It's not made for this phone. I think I might have a battery for this phone, but I can't find it right now. That had a phone number on the startup that I had to cut out. And here's the last of the working phones here. Here is a Motorola 120T on Singular. I already have one of these in pretty brand new shape, actually. This one is obviously used, so I may end up selling it. This battery I just took from my other 120T. This one doesn't have its own back cover. This one had another phone number that I had to cut out. Alright, so that's it for the working phones. Now I will show you the untested phones. Alright, so here are the untested phones, 8 of them. Start here. This is the Sony Ericsson T616 on AT&T Wireless. I don't have a charger for this one. And if you can't tell, I have my flash turned on at this point. Next up here is my Sony Ericsson T637 on Singular. Same here, don't have a charger for this one. Here's my Palm Trio 680 on Singular. No charger for this one either. And I think the battery might have swelled up on it. Yeah, because I remember having to take the battery out of this one. Next up, here is a UMX U504TL on TrackPhone. It's kind of dusty, but this one I don't have a battery for. I plugged it in, it shows signs of life. If I had a battery for this one, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Google locked. Here's a Samsung X495 on T-Mobile. This one I'm not able to verify that it's in working condition. I think the battery might be bad on it. And here is a Motorola on United States Cellular, aka US Cellular. I believe this is called the Digital Personal Communicator, which was one of the MicroTac phones. I might be wrong about that, but that's because I was watching a video by Retrocoms about the MicroTac phones, and that's what her research yielded. I don't have a charger for this one. Here's a Blue Studio G. Not sure what carrier this is on, but I believe that this one has a bad battery. And last here is an LG Optimus F3 on TextNow. This one I just don't have a battery for. Alright, so now let's move on to the broken phones. Alright, so here are the last of the phones in this lot, the broken phones, 7 of them. So let's start with this one right here. This is a Kyocera Torino on Metro PCS. This is the phone that you saw in the unboxing that had the Hello Kitty sticker on it. This one is pretty much dead. It did nothing on the charger, no power. Here is the very mangled iPhone XR. I have no idea what carrier it's on, and I have it in this bag because it's probably just dropping little shards of glass in this bag. Do it in here instead of all over wherever I put this phone. And this one, in addition to it just being in very poor shape, is FMI on. So if this one did work, it would probably be iCloud locked. I know there are people that are able to bypass that, but I'm just not really into it. I'm not much of an iPhone person. Here is an LG Rumor Touch on Sprint. This one has a broken screen. Here's a Samsung Sway on Verizon. This one also has a broken screen. It's a shame because this one is actually in better shape than my other Samsung Sway. And these 3 here turn on but have various issues. This is a BlackBerry Curve 8330 on Sprint. This one has a broken trackball. Everything else about it works, unfortunately. So if the trackball worked, this one would work totally fine. I might fix this one. I don't know, probably not. We'll see. And here's another BlackBerry 8330, except on Verizon. This one has some cracked plastic, but the keyboard, part of the keyboard is broken. If it weren't for that, this would be a working phone as well. And the last phone in this lot here is a BlackBerry Storm 9530 on Verizon. This one, I'm not quite sure what's wrong with the software, but it's like basically unusable. It turns on and everything, but I can't do anything with the phone when it's turned on. It just freezes up constantly. So that's why I think this phone has broken software. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the update on the lot. I have more content coming up soon. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the next video. Peace.